Emily Rogers hadn't smiled in weeks, not a real one, not the kind that reached the corners of her tired, amber-flecked eyes. A third-grade teacher by day and full-time single mother by night, she lived life like a candle burning at both ends. Bills, lesson plans. A son with a growing curiosity and questions she couldn't always answer. It was barely time to breathe, let alone rest out, so when the Saturday morning sky arrived, painted in clear blue, warm and windless, it felt like a quiet kind of miracle. "Let's go to the river trail," she told Jacob, her 10-year-old son, as he munched on cereal in their small kitchen. "Just the three of us. No homework, no phones. Just air and trees." Jacob's face lit up. And Max? Especially Max. Max, their golden retriever, lifted his head at the sound of his name, tail already thumping against the floor like a metronome. He was only 3 years old, but his eyes carried the wisdom of a soul who had seen hard days and chosen gentleness anyway. By 10 a.m., they were packed. Sandwiches, water bottles, a first aid kit, an old checkered picnic blanket, everything stuffed into a single backpack Emily slung over her shoulder. They drove out to the Cedar Rock trailhead, tucked just past a forgotten back road near the Tennessee River. It wasn't a busy spot, which is exactly why Emily loved it. The trail greeted them with a soft rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of the river. Max ran ahead, nose twitching, tail flagging with excitement. Jacob followed behind, pointing out beetles and snapping pictures of moss with his disposable camera. Emily walked slowly, savoring the rhythm of boots crunching earth. After half an hour, they reached a quiet clearing near the water's edge. The trees leaned gently over the river like protective elders. Emily spread the blanket, while Jacob stacked flat stones, and Max bounded around chasing shadows. For the first time in ages, the knot in her chest loosened. She lay back on the blanket and let her eyes close beneath the sun. Peace. For a little while, there was peace. Then everything changed. It started with a sudden gust, sharp and unexpected. Emily sat up, frowning. The trees had stilled. Even the birds fell silent. Max barked once, low and uncertain. The temperature dropped so fast it made her shiver. Within seconds, clouds rolled in like an invading army, thick gray and moving fast. "Jacob, pack it up," she said, standing. "Now." They grabbed their things, and Emily slung the backpack over one shoulder. Max whined, ears pinned back. Thunder cracked in the distance. They were 5 minutes down the trail, maybe less, when the rain started sharp and cold and sudden. It pelted them in sheets, turning the packed dirt into slippery mud. Emily gripped Jacob's hand tightly as they hurried, heads down, soaked within moments. Then her foot hit a slick patch. She slipped, cried out, and tumbled down the side of the trail. Mud gave way under her weight. Rocks and branches clawed at her clothes as gravity took her, spinning, falling, until splash. Emily plunged into the river, vanishing beneath the surface. "Mom!" Jacob screamed from the top of the embankment. The current was stronger than it had looked. The spring storm had swelled the river to something furious. Emily fought to rise, but her backpack pulled her down. Her boots were heavy, soaked. She surfaced once long enough to suck in air, then the water dragged her under again. Max barked wildly, pacing at the top of the slope. Then, without hesitation, he bolted. Jacob saw him leap. One golden blur arced through the rain and crashed into the water with barely a splash. Max disappeared for a second, then he was swimming, straight toward Emily. The river gripped her like a monster with 100 invisible hands. Cold, rushing, relentless, it spun Emily sideways and dragged her farther from the muddy shore. Her mouth broke the surface just long enough to scream Jacob's name before another surge crashed over her head. The world was noise and water, and panic got her arms flailed, searching for something, anything, to hold. The backpack's weight was dragging her back down, but she didn't dare unclasp it. It had Jacob's asthma inhaler, her phone, their only map. She tried to kick, to orient herself, but the river was moving fast, fed by the sudden downpour. Her boots were pulling her down. Her coat felt like armor made of lead. She broke the surface again, coughing, gasping. A branch passed within inches. She missed it. The current caught her and pulled again, this time toward the bend where the river narrowed and churned like a beast feeding on itself. She wasn't going to make it. From the hill above, Jacob watched with wide, helpless eyes. His mother was being swallowed, inch by inch, and he couldn't do anything. The rain pounded on his head like punishment. He screamed until his throat hurt. Max didn't hesitate. The dog had always hated water. Even baths were a battle. But now, he was in it, legs kicking, body slicing through the river like a missile of fur and muscle. Jacob saw his tail disappear beneath the water, then surface again, moving steadily toward Emily. Emily didn't see him coming. Her head dipped again. The current sucked her under with a brutal, gurgling force. Then a tug. Something gripped the strap of her backpack. At first, she thought it was the river taking her for good. But no, it was steady. It pulled upward, not down. It was warm. Alive. Teeth. Max had found her. Emily's dazed mind grasped one image, Max's golden coat just below the surface. His eyes wide with effort, his jaws clenched around the strap. He was paddling with every ounce of strength in his body, snarling through the water like he could will the river to obey. He was fighting for her. Her body rolled, face up, and she gasped. She could see sky again, gray, angry sky, but it was sky. Max barked once, around the strap, then kept swimming. The current tried to take them both. Max struggled. His paws churned like propellers, his hind legs kicking furiously. For a moment, Emily could feel him losing ground. He barked again, as if yelling at her to fight. So she did. Her right hand grabbed the loose end of the strap. Her left clawed toward the surface. Her feet kicked weakly, but together they managed to edge closer to the right bank, where the river was shallower, slower. Max was practically dragging her at this point, half swimming, half drowning himself. Branches scraped her side. She reached one, missed, reached again this time, her fingers locked on. She gripped tight. Max gave a final lurch and let go of the strap, collapsing onto the nearest patch of wet sand with a grunt. Emily hauled herself forward, coughing, gagging, collapsing just inches from Max. They lay there in the rain, both gasping. Alive. Emily blinked slowly, her face pressed into the earth. The storm roared around them, but it was muffled, now distant. Max whimpered and nudged her shoulder. She reached out with a shaking hand and touched his head. Max, she rasped. He licked her fingers. Up on the trail, Jacob was gone already, running back the way they came, legs pumping, voice hoarse with desperation. Max laid his head across Emily's stomach and refused to move, not until help arrived. 2 years earlier, Max was nothing more than a shaking mass of fur behind a rusty kennel gate. Emily hadn't gone to the county shelter to adopt. She was just looking, just filling the empty hours on a weekend when Jacob's father had bailed. On his visit again. But Jacob had spotted Max instantly, pulling Emily by the hand, past yapping puppies and pleading brown eyes, straight to the cage with a half-starved golden retriever who didn't lift his head. The tag read, Stray, estimated. Age, 1 year. Not housebroken. The dog looked broken, thin, ribs showing, tail bent at a strange angle. One eye was half closed, maybe injured, maybe infected. But when Jacob pressed his small palm to the glass and whispered, "It's okay, buddy," The dog moved just enough to lick the pain once before collapsing again. Emily tried to steer him away. We can't get a dog, Jake. But he needs us. She shook her head. I can't afford another mouth to feed. Then I'll feed him. They came back the next weekend, and the weekend after that, By the third visit, the shelter attendant knew them by name. Nobody's come for him, she told Emily. He's on the list for transfer, maybe worse, if the next shelter's full. Emily stared into Max's eyes. There was no pleading in them. No begging. Just a quiet sort of waiting, like he'd already accepted whatever came next. That night, Max came home with them. He was terrified of doorways. Loud noises made him hide under beds. The vacuum sent him into a panic, but slowly, through quiet afternoons and peanut butter on spoons, Jacob earned his trust. He read to Max at night Charlotte's Web, The Hobbit, a dog-eared captain, underpants. Emily, still reeling from the divorce and financial stress, found peace in Max's quiet presence. He didn't judge her for falling asleep on the couch or crying while washing dishes. He didn't care about the unpaid bills or the stack of overdue papers on her desk. Max just curled up at her feet, offering warmth without expectation. One afternoon, Emily tripped over a laundry basket on the stairs, yelping as she fell. Max bolted to her side, barking frantically until Jacob came running. Another night, Emily suffered a panic attack brought on by a call from her ex and a long overdue electric bill. Max crawled onto her chest and laid there, heavy and warm, until her breath slowed again. She had thought he was just a pet, but Max had been watching, listening, learning, loving. Jacob taught him the basic sit, stay, roll over. But Max picked up on things no one taught: when to bark, when to stand guard, when someone needed him close. And now, on that muddy riverbank, soaked to the bone, that same dog had made a decision in a single second to dive into a raging river. Because the woman who saved him was in danger, Emily didn't remember all of it. Just flashes, the chill of the water, the roar in her ears, the terrible weight dragging her down. And Max, a blur of gold, a grip on her backpack, that unshakable presence, refusing to let her vanish. Now, lying on the shore, Max's head on her chest, she whispered, "You're my hero. You know that?" Max's ears flicked. He nudged her chin, then let out a long sigh. He wasn't looking for praise. He had just done what he was trained to do, not by commands, but by love. Jacob had never run so hard in his life. His soaked sneakers slapped against the trail, each step a blur of terror and determination. Rain slashed his face, mud caked his jeans, and his breath came in ragged gasps, but he didn't slow. He couldn't. His mom was down there, somewhere along the riverbank, and Max Brave, Goofy Max, was with her. They needed help, and he was the only one who could get it. His mind raced even faster than his feet. Should he go back to the car? It was still nearly a mile away. He didn't have a phone. His mom had theirs in her backpack. Maybe there had been a ranger station near the parking lot? He couldn't remember. He skidded around a bend and nearly lost his footing. A low branch slapped his shoulder. He barely felt it. Don't stop. He kept running. Halfway back to the trailhead, the storm reached its crescendo. Lightning snapped across the sky, close enough that the air itself seemed to split open. Thunder boomed like an explosion. Jacob flinched, but didn't slow. Then voices. Two of them, muffled through the trees, and a flicker of orange. Raincoats. "Hey!" he screamed, waving his arms. "Help! Please help!" The two hikers, a man and woman in their 40s, turned toward him, startled. The woman grabbed his arms. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "My mom, she fell in the river. Our dog jumped in. She's down there. She's hurt. I think I don't know." The words tumbled out, broken and breathless. The man pulled out his phone instantly. Where exactly? Jacob pointed back down the trail, the bend by the big rock near the cedar grove. The man nodded and dialed 911. The woman knelt, pulling off her backpack to grab a thermal blanket. You're freezing, she said, wrapping it around Jacob's shoulders. I'm fine, he said, teeth chattering. Just help my mom. The man spoke calmly into the phone. We've got a woman who fell into the river off the Cedar Rock Trail. Possible hypothermia. Dog pulled her out, according to her son. Coordinates coming now. Then he turned back to Jacob. Listen, helps. On the way. Rangers, EMTs, they'll be here soon. But we're going to get to your mom now, all right? Jacob nodded fiercely. The three of them moved fast, cutting down the trail, the man leading with his flashlight out, the woman keeping a hand on Jacob's shoulder. By the time they reached the riverbank clearing, the rain had eased to a drizzle. The storm had moved on, but the damage was done. The river had swollen. The path was slick, and the air carried the sharp metallic scent of danger. Emily still lay where Jacob had left her, half conscious, curled slightly around Max, who hadn't moved. For a terrifying second, Jacob thought she wasn't breathing. Then she stirred. Max raised his head and let out a low, tired bark. She's alive. The woman shouted. The man splashed forward, kneeling beside Emily and checking her pulse. She's hypothermic, but stable. We need to keep her warm until the EMTs get here. Emily's lips moved. Jake? I'm here, Mom. Jacob knelt beside her, hugging her as best he could through the thermal blanket. Max gave a weak tail thump, pressing his nose into Jacob's arm. The hikers pulled more blankets from their packs and covered her, careful not to move her too much. Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens echoed through the woods. When the EMTs arrived, 6 of them, with ropes and stretchers and warm packs, Emily was conscious enough to whisper, "The dog, he saved me." Max let out one tired, grateful woof, then closed his eyes again. The hospital lights buzzed softly overhead as Emily stirred beneath the sterile sheets. Her body ached deep in her bones, in her ribs, in the muscles she didn't even know she had, but the pain was secondary. Her first thought was Jacob. Then, like a second heartbeat, came the next thought. Max. She blinked groggy, trying to sit up, but a nurse appeared beside her almost immediately. Easy, the woman said gently. You've had quite the scare, but you're stable now. My son, Emily rasped. He's fine. Jacob's right outside. He hasn't left since you came in. Emily exhaled in relief. And your dog? The nurse smiled, almost in disbelief. Still at the vet clinic downstairs. They're treating him like royalty. A soft knock broke the moment. The door opened. Slowly, and Jacob stepped inside, clutching a bag of vending machine snacks and a handmade card. Mom! Emily held her arms open. Jacob rushed into them, careful not to squeeze too tight. You're okay, he whispered. You're really okay. She kissed the top of his head. Thanks to you and Max. Jacob pulled back, eyes shining. Everyone's talking about him. The EMTs said they've never seen anything like it. He swam right into that river like he knew exactly what to do. Emily smiled faintly. He did know. The next day, the vet released Max with a clean bill of health, slightly dehydrated, exhausted, and with a minor muscle strain, but otherwise miraculously unharmed. When they wheeled Emily out in her chair, Max lunged forward, tail wagging furiously, whimpering with joy. He licked her face the moment she leaned down. You saved my life, she whispered into his fur. I'll never forget that. A local reporter had caught wind of the story through the EMTs. By the end of the week, Emily's phone was buzzing with interview requests. News vans appeared outside their modest apartment building. Headlines like, Golden Retriever Saves, Drowning woman and local dog's incredible river rescue lit up the internet. They were offered a feature on the evening news, then a follow-up on a national morning show. Max, freshly bathed and sporting a red service vest, sat stoically through it all, occasionally glancing at Emily like, "Are we done yet?" At first, Emily wasn't sure how to handle the attention. She didn't want fame, just peace. But she realized something beautiful was happening. People weren't just watching Max's story. They were feeling something because of it. Strangers mailed letters. One read, "I was having a rough week, but this story reminded me of the good still in the world." Another sent a photo of their own rescued dog, saying, "Max gave me hope." Animal shelters across the state reported an uptick in adoptions. People were naming their new pets Max. A local pet supply chain offered Max a lifetime supply of food. The vet clinic that treated him waived all fees and nominated him for the National Canine Bravery Award. One morning, Jacob ran into the living room holding a framed certificate. "He won, Mom!" he shouted. "Max got the award. He's gonna be in a calendar." Emily laughed a full, rich laugh that hadn't come easily in months. Max thumped his tail once from the couch, as if saying, "About time someone noticed." Later that night, as the cameras faded and the interviews paused, Emily sat on the porch with Max at her feet, and Jacob nestled beside her under a shared blanket. The stars blinked above them. Crisp and clear dot, she reached down to scratch Max behind the ears. "You didn't just save my life," she said softly. "You saved us, me and Jacob. You reminded me what love looks like when it doesn't ask for anything in return." Max looked up at her, then rested his head on her foot. No fanfare, no applause, just quiet devotion. And to Emily, that meant everything. The story of Max's heroic river rescue continued to ripple far beyond the quiet streets of their hometown. A few weeks after the flood, a handwritten letter arrived in a plain envelope. The return address read, Walter D. Halvorsen, retired K-9 officer, Fayetteville, NC. Emily opened it at the kitchen table while Max chewed lazily on a new squeaky toy, completely unaware of his rising fame. "Dear Emily and Jacob, I saw your story on the news. I'm an old dog handler, retired now, but I worked with service animals and rescue dogs for 30 years. What your Max did, that wasn't just instinct. That was training built from love, from trust, from time. You gave that to him, and he gave it back when it mattered most. I lost my last partner, Duke, 5 years ago. Thought I was done, but watching Max in action lit something in me again. So thank you for sharing your story. You reminded an old man why dogs like Max are worth everything. P.S. If Max ever wants to learn more than sit and stay, my door's always open." Emily wiped a tear from her cheek and read the letter twice more. She folded it gently and set it beside Max's food bowl. Max looked up, tail swishing once like he understood. That was just the beginning. The next week, a school in Oregon invited Emily to speak to their students about courage and responsibility. A firefighter from Colorado wrote an email saying Max's story was being used in their training as a case study in companion animal bravery. A children's book author reached out, asking permission to turn Max's story into a picture book about quiet heroes. Emily found herself fielding interviews again, but this time she felt steadier. It wasn't about attention anymore. It was about meaning. Max's loyalty, his love, had become a beacon for people who needed something to believe in. One evening, Jacob came home from school beaming. "You won't believe what happened." Emily smiled. "Try me. They made Max our school mascot. They even painted a mural. He's wearing a cape." Emily chuckled, shaking her head. "He's going to get a big head." Max tilted his own, mid-yawn, and licked Jacob's hand in approval. But the story wasn't just reaching people in schools and shelters. It had caught the attention of someone else, someone who could make a real difference. One crisp afternoon, as autumn leaves danced across their driveway, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of their apartment. A woman in a navy blue blazer stepped out. She introduced herself as Agent Reyes, representing a national nonprofit focused on pairing rescue dogs with veterans suffering from PTSD. "We've been following Max's story closely," she said, crouching down to scratch behind his ears. "And we think he's something special." Emily blinked. "He already is." Agent Reyes nodded. "We know. That's why we're hoping Max could be the ambassador for a new program. We're launching training shelter dogs to become support animals for first responders and veterans." Jacob's eyes widened. "Like Max would teach other dogs?" "In a way," Reyes said, smiling. "We'd document his journey, share his story during training sessions. Let people see how trust and patience can transform a rescue into a lifesaver." Emily glanced at Max. He sat there calmly, tongue lolling, eyes bright. He'd faced fear, faced water and death, and still somehow managed to look like the happiest dog on earth. "He'd love that," she said, "as long as he still gets his." "Couch time," Reyes laughed. "Deal." That night, Emily stood on the porch with Max beside her once again. The wind rustled through the trees, but her heart felt still, rooted, whole. What had started as a tragedy had become something else entirely. Movement of Hope. And Max, the once broken shelter dog, was leading the charge. Max stood at the front of the small auditorium, tail wagging gently, as a dozen wide-eyed veterans watched from folding chairs. Most of them were quiet, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast, expressions shadowed with memories they didn't speak of. But when Max gave his signature sideways head tilt, followed by a slow, deliberate paw shake, a few of them actually smiled. That was the first breakthrough. The nonprofit's pilot, program Paws of Valor, had officially launched just a month earlier. Max had been introduced not just as a mascot, but as the face of a quiet revolution. Rescue dogs for rescued souls. Emily watched from the back of the room, hands loosely folded in front of her, heart full. She couldn't believe how far they had come. From a muddy riverbank and a near drowning to this Max, helping to heal people who had been carrying invisible wounds for years. After the session, a man named Corporal Adrian Mills approached Emily. He had a Marine Corps pin on his jacket, and his handshake was firm, though his eyes avoided hers. I didn't come here expecting to feel anything," he said. "But that dog?" He nodded toward Max, who was now rolling over for belly rubs from another veteran. "He reminded me of my old K9 back in Kabul. Took me years to even talk about." "That," Emily offered a soft smile. "Max has a way of unlocking people." "He doesn't judge," Adrian said. "Just shows up." "That's exactly what he did for me and Jacob." The two stood in silence for a beat, watching Max charm yet another tough-looking vet into giggling like a kid. Later that evening, after the session had ended and the gear had been packed away, Emily and Jacob drove home with Max curled up in the back seat, head resting on his paws. His vest, now stitched with the words "Paws of Valor Canine Ambassador," gleamed softly in the dim car light. Jacob, nearly dozing in the front seat, mumbled, "You think Max knows how many people he's helping?" Emily glanced at him then, at Max through the rearview mirror. "I think he just knows he's doing something good," she said, "and that's enough for him." Back home, life settled into a new rhythm. Emily resumed part-time teaching. Jacob thrived in school, and Max became something of a local celebrity. Not in the flashy way of internet fame, but in the quiet nods of recognition at the farmer's market, or the extra biscuits slipped to him at the bakery. But the work with the nonprofit deepened. Max now helped guide other rescue dogs through The early stages of training, providing a calming presence as they learned to trust again. His story, played in a short video at the beginning of each new session, became a sort of scripture for the program. One of the trainers, a tough, no-nonsense woman named Karen, who had worked with dozens of dogs, leaned over to Emily one day and sighed, "We have a phrase here. The dog chooses the mission. Max chose his. He's not just a survivor. He's a guide." That stuck with Emily. A guide, because that's what he had been. Through the storm, through her fear, through the recovery that followed. Max hadn't saved her because someone told him to. He'd saved her because that's who he was, who he chose to be. And now, he was choosing to save others too. One evening, as the autumn sun dipped low behind the hills, Emily sat on the porch again with Max pressed against her leg. Jacob was inside practicing his reading for school. Emily stroked Max's ears. "You know, I thought we rescued you. But I'm starting to think maybe it was the other way around." Max blinked slowly and licked her hand, as if to say, "We rescued each other." 2 years later, the statue stood tall in the center of Haven Park. Cast in bronze, it captured Max mid-stride, ears perked, eyes alert, one paw lifted like he was always about to leap into action. At his base, a simple plaque read, "Max, a friend, a savior, a guide. For those who've been rescued, may you someday rescue others." The dedication drew a crowd from every corner of the community. Veterans from the Paws of Valor program came, in full dress. Children from local schools lined the path, holding handmade signs with paw prints and the words, "Thank you, Max." Animal shelters brought their adoptable dogs. And at the front of it all stood Emily and Jacob, their hands clasped tightly, with Max seated proudly at their feet. He was older now, his muzzle dusted with gray, his movements slower, but his eyes were just as bright, and his tail wagged steadily, as if he understood the moment wasn't about fame. It was about heart. The mayor gave a brief speech, quoting from letters the town had received from across the country. One line, written by a young girl from Michigan, struck everyone silent. "Max made me believe that love can be brave." When Emily stepped forward to speak, the wind quieted and the birds seemed to hush in the trees. "I've told this story more times than I can count," she began, voice steady. "But no matter how many times I share it, it always starts the same, with a boy, a dog, and a river." She paused, looking down at Max. "I thought I was the one raising him. But really, he was raising us, me and Jacob. He showed us what loyalty looks like when it costs something. What it means to risk everything for love." She gestured to the crowd. "Max's story is all of ours now. It's the story of second chances, of broken things made whole, of how sometimes the quietest among us can leave the loudest legacy." Applause broke out, and Max, unfazed, yawned and blinked at the crowd like a true professional. After the ceremony, people gathered around the statue, touching the bronze paw, taking pictures, telling their own stories of dogs who had meant something, who had helped them through dark days, who had made them laugh when they didn't want to, who had stayed when everyone else left. Emily and Jacob stood quietly as the world celebrated Max. He didn't need the attention. He didn't seek it. But he had earned it. As the sun dipped low and the crowd slowly thinned, Emily sat beside the statue with Max lying next to her, his head resting on her shoe, just as he had so many nights on their porch. Jacob approached, holding a sketchpad. "I drew something for you," he said, handing it to her. It was a drawing of Max's signature head tilt, a paw stretched out toward the viewer. Behind him stood a dozen other dogs, each unique, each alert. Above them were words in big block letters. Max showed them the way. Emily felt her throat tighten. He really did. That night, back at home, as the cool wind carried the first hints of winter, Max curled up on his favorite blanket near the fireplace. Jacob lay on the rug beside him, reading out loud from a new book, a story about a dog who saved a life and changed the world. Emily watched from the couch, one hand resting over her heart. She knew that time moved fast, that seasons changed and lives unfolded in ways you couldn't predict. But Max's story, their story, would linger. In parks and schools, in shelters and veteran homes, in the quiet moments when someone needed a reminder that love, loyalty, and courage still existed. Max would be there. Not just in bronze, not just in memory, but in the hearts of everyone he'd ever touched. And for Emily, that was more than enough.